Barbara Lamb is a name many in the ET and UFO field know very well. For over 2 decades, Barbara has researched and lectured on the subject of extraterrestrial encounters. Having regressed well over 1,000 individuals with these encounters, Barbara continues to reveal new vistas into the idea that many on this planet just may have direct connections with non-human intelligence. In this, my second interview with Barbara, done at her home just outside of Los Angeles, we discussed her latest project, and that's a book in which she co-authored with researcher Miguel Mendonca called Meet the Hybrids. Some of what Barbara discusses in this sit-down chat about the hybrids may surprise you, and some might seem familiar to you. Either way, I know you'll find what Barbara has to say nothing short of extraordinary. Take a listen. Barbara, it's such a pleasure to be sitting here with you in person, finally.
Yes.
After we've known each other for a few years, we met a couple of years ago and had the pleasure of our first interview, which I have to tell you is our first, or the first 2-hour interview that I've ever done.
Really?
It sure is, because I knew that the subject that we would be covering was so meaty that in order to do it justice, we'd have to have 2 hours. And we spent a great deal of that time talking about the hybrids.
Yes, we did.
And so I think it was perfectly apt to have this conversation today with your new book, Meet the Hybrids, The Lives and Missions of ET Ambassadors on Earth, that you co-authored with Miguel Mendonca. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing that right. So excited. And I also want to make mention, Barbara, traveling from Phoenix, Arizona, the International UFO Congress that just finished up, and you came back with an award in tow, didn't you? Tell us about that.
Well, the International UFO Congress is a wonderful annual event, and it's been going on for, I think, 26 or 27 years, and I think it is the largest of the UFO conferences that happen anywhere in the world. And they call it International UFO Congress because they always bring speakers from some other countries, as well as UFO researchers from the United States. So it's always a very wonderful group of people, very alive audience and very responsive. So this time I gave a lecture about ET human hybrids who are living here on Earth. I called the lecture Meet the Hybrids, the same title as the book. And so we had 6 of these people who are real ET human hybrids living on Earth, and 6 of them came up on the stage with me, and after I gave a talk for about a half an hour or so, they each had their own turn to speak about their experience of being a hybrid and how they found out that they were hybrids and how they became a hybrid in the first place, and what their special skills and abilities are that most people don't have. Some rare people do, but they're all involved in healing and psychic work and teaching and training and so forth. And then they had a chance to really express their own mission. Because you see, these people with extraterrestrial genetics, they have an ongoing contact with these other beings. We call them extraterrestrials.
Right.
They tend to call them their star family or
I've heard that
star
term before.
Beings. We would usually use the term extraterrestrial or alien, which I do not care for that term, because many of them are so benevolent and so friendly.
Yeah, the connotation, unfortunately, of alien has been blown out of proportion, and it is really, I agree with you.
Yes, it has a very negative connotation. And all of these beings connected with these people are so very benevolent, so unconditionally loving, and so advanced spiritually that I could never possibly use that word alien with them. But so they were talking about their star people, their extraterrestrials, and the visits that they have, and the guidance, a very high consciousness guidance that is given to them as they're living their lives. So it was wonderful that they each had provided drawings of their beings, whom they have a lot of contact with and have as part of their genetics as well. And I was able to show those on the slides, on the big screens. And so people could really get a feeling of what these people are about and whom they're connected with. And to my amazement, people, after the lecture, there were still 2 days left, 2.5 days left of the conference, and I and each one of these hybrids had a very unusual number of people, one by one, coming to us and saying, "Thank you so much for making us aware of this. You know, we didn't know," and they think it's wonderful. And many people said, you know, at these UFO congresses or conferences, the emphasis, understandably, is very often on videos of UFOs that people have taken, and orbs of light, and the nuts and bolts, we call it, the crafts. And I was very appreciative of that way back 26, 27, 28 years ago when I was just getting interested in this field and felt that I needed proof that there really are these crafts that are not ours. They really come from somewhere else in space, and that there really are beings on those crafts. So that's important. But this lecture was so different. It was like this was right at the heart of the matter, as many of us consider it. It's not just the flying crafts and they come from somewhere else in space, although that's very, very significant. But this is the beings themselves and what they're here for, and how many of them are so positive and are really guiding and inspiring humans living here, and hoping to make a positive change within humanity.
Right. Well, you know, there's a lot of meat to this that I want to get into. I'm going to give a quick shout out to your wonderful colleague Grant Cameron, who I just recently met just a day or so ago at the Conscious Life Expo, who wrote a brilliant foreword to your book.
He did.
I just want to make sure the audience knows you can't miss out on the foreword, because I think it really gives a nice little summary of what we're going to get into this book. And I want to bring that in at this point because, to me, I didn't have a chance to read the entire book, but to me, the overwhelming message that I got was and is the benevolent aspect, the love aspect, the heart of the matter. The fact that these beings are not just here to let us know of their existence for the purpose of novelty, but as spiritual guides, which is what you talk about, you and Miguel in the book. So I'd love to have you elaborate on that. They consider themselves as spiritual guides for us?
Well, yes, these hybrids living with us, they're all very spiritually oriented people. First of all, I would like to say that each one of these 8 hybrids featured in this book, Meet the Hybrids, they were each born here from a human mother. And so, you know, they weren't just dropped here from a spaceship. And they were born in the regular way that you and I and everybody, all humans here, are born. And they're born to regular families, living normal lives. And so when they were little, each one of them, they wondered why they were feeling so different than even people in their family, and different than all the other children at school, and then eventually different than all the other adults they knew. They didn't look particularly different.
They don't. Okay.
No.
Yeah.
But they felt it, and they felt, I'm just not like them. And I see the world, I see people, I see humanity, I see animals, I see everything in a different way. I don't know anyone else who feels the same way as I do
Mm-hmm.
about humanity and life here on Earth. And in most cases, they felt, I just keep feeling like I'm not really from here.
Okay.
I mean, here I am, a human being, but I don't feel entirely like a human being. And they all exhibited very early in childhood that they had some exceptional skills.
Like what?
Like telepathy, that they could know what somebody near them was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, sometimes they'd get into some trouble with that.
Yeah.
When they were little, a little 3-year-old saying, "Oh, Mommy, I know that you were just thinking of such and such," and she'd say, she wouldn't like that. I mean, how can this little kid be reading her mind? And they would read other minds of other children and know who was lying and who wasn't, and who was of goodwill and who wasn't. So that was one skill. But they also noticed early in life that they were very psychic, not only telepathic but psychic, and they could instantly pick up certain things about people, which subsequently they learned was true,
Mm-hmm.
and they knew about some events forthcoming, and people didn't like them to mention these things because most of us don't have those abilities,
Yeah.
and it would make people feel very uncomfortable. So sometimes they were given sort of a hard time with their skills, and they all realized very early in life that they had healing ability,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them developed it more than others during childhood, but by the time they become adults, which is when we met them, they were really very proficient healers.
Still.
Mostly Reiki healers, but
Okay.
Light language healers. One calls it sound and color healing, and so they have their own version, their own methods of healing. And they can heal a person in person, right there with the person. They can also heal remotely. And I experienced this during the summer months of 2015, spring, summer, early fall, when Miguel Mendonca and I did long interviews
I know.
with each of
Upwards
these people.
of 100 hours, I believe, right? Or maybe
yeah,
more.
More than
Yeah,
100
that's
hours.
extraordinary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so long interviews with each one on Skype, because we all live in very different areas.
Mm-hmm.
3 of them are in England, and others are scattered throughout the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
But we had these wonderful interviews on Skype, and they realized that, because we told them that on July 1st, last year, 2015, I had a massive stroke and was hospitalized.
You did?
I did.
Oh,
And
Barbara,
was-
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
And was hospitalized for 5 days and really quite out of it for quite a while.
Of course.
But during that recuperation period, even in that first month, the one thing that I did professionally was sit at my computer when we had a Skype interview, and so I could see the person and see Miguel, my co-author, and they could both see me and each other. So it was almost like being in person. And when these people realized that I had this stroke, they would immediately go into sending healing.
Isn't
And
it extraordinary?
it sounds a little bit strange perhaps,
No.
but I could feel that healing through the computer, through
Sure.
Skype.
That doesn't sound
Yeah.
at all odd to me, and I don't want to interrupt you, but I think it should be noted. We've had this conversation, I believe, before. That in fact, just had it with Linda Moulton Howe 2 days ago
Okay.
on the role that our digital our technology may be playing in proliferating these sorts of extraordinary remote at a distance things, including
Yes.
the appearance of non-human entities through
Yes.
using technology as a conduit. So we're not going to go off on a
Yes.
tangent there, but I just want to say, and I think our audience is well acclimated to this idea, that somehow our use of technology, the way it's being used, of course, there are some aspects to it that aren't good for us. But on the other hand, it seems that in these areas that we're talking about, it seems to be playing an integral role in the non-human intelligence and how it's interacting with us. So,
you're so right, and I would like to just add another
please
thought
do.
to
Please
that.
do.
Exactly, and that is that on one of these Skype interviews with one of our hybrids, at some point during the interview, I was feeling a very active tingling on the top back lobe of my head, the cerebellum. And I just noticed that as we were doing the interview, that that whole part of my head, that not only the skull but inside in the brain, was feeling very like little tingles jumping all around. It was very activated. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, but I didn't mention it. And then Jacqueline, one of the hybrids, said, because she was seeing me on Skype, and she said, I just want you to know, Barbara, that there are 3 mantis beings standing behind you, and they have their hands over your head, and particularly sort of the back top part of your head, and they are adding healing energy. So I realized that's what I had been feeling. So I don't have that kind of sight looking into other dimensions like she does. She could see them, and they were some of her family beings. These beautiful,
from the
tall
mantis family,
mantis
or
beings.
some say mantid, depending on where you are. Mantid
Sure.
as well. Yeah, but wow,
Yeah.
very interesting.
And so that was sort of a proof to me that she really knew what she was doing, what she was talking about, because I was feeling it intensely. And then she said, these 3 beings are standing behind you with their hands over your head, adding healing energy to the part of the brain that was affected.
So how did you feel after this was happening?
I felt wonderful. I felt so happy. And it turns out that for years, in my doing all the regression work that I've done with experiencers of extraterrestrial encounters, that whenever I would do a regression which involved the mantis beings, and you pointed out sometimes they're called mantid, sometimes they're called insectoids, but I prefer the word mantis, like a big praying mantis.
That's right.
And that I had learned from these regressions and other people's experiences that the mantis beings were so kindly,
I've heard that.
gentle, kindly, not only loving, but unconditionally loving. And that's part of this hybrid named Jacqueline, part of her makeup. She has a large part of mantis genetics in her, and she gets visits from these mantis beings frequently. Sometimes they'll take her on board their craft, and sometimes they just stay and visit with her in her home. But it's always a very positive, loving experience. So she has that kind of sight that even though they're in a somewhat higher dimension than we are, they're probably at least in the 5th dimension compared to our being in the 3rd dimension. But she has the ability to see into that dimension, that frequency. The hybrids were very often talking about differences in frequency, which corresponded with the different dimensions.
Right.
So even though I didn't see these 3 beings behind me, I definitely
Did you sense
felt
them?
Did I what?
Did you sense them?
Well, yes. I mean, I didn't really, I must say, until she brought it to my attention. I certainly felt the tingling and that something was going on with my head and wondered what that was. And then when she pointed out that there were these 3 tall beings behind me, and I closed my eyes for some moments, and then it certainly seemed like I could feel their presence. And it was very soft, very gentle. Nothing abrasive, nothing threatening in the least bit.
Amazing, Barbara. as I listen to you and another mutual colleague who says hello, by the way, and that's Mary Rodwell.
Oh, she's a dear friend of mine.
I know she is, and
Yeah.
she just loves you dearly.
Oh, I love
but,
her.
As a matter of fact, I interviewed Mary just recently, our third together.
Good.
And again, the reference to our talk was about what her book is that she's working on called The New Humans.
Yes.
I find amazing correlations
The
already
Star
with
Children.
how the Star Children, I think maybe we're talking about one and the same, the features that you're bringing up about these hybrids and their telepathic and psychic abilities,
Right.
their connections to the various species, including the mantis.
Yeah.
So I wanted to put that in there because I do find a striking correlation. But again, in each case that I have had occasion to learn about this non-human species we call mantis or mantid or insectoid, I've heard that term, invariably what is brought out about them is their loving demeanor.
Yes.
Loving demeanor,
Yes.
their benevolence. Now, I've listened to several accounts of people who have claimed to see these beings physically manifest.
Right.
And in that they're sort of fashioned, we'll say, like the praying mantis, except in some cases 8 or 9 feet tall.
Yes, yes.
They can be quite startling, to say the least.
Yes.
But I've heard
Until you get to know them.
until you get to know them.
Yeah, and then they're wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I find that amazing. I just wanted to bring that point up because I think that's something very important and adds to the benevolence aspect of these hybrids.
Yes.
Another question I want to ask you.
Sure.
So many regarding what we call the hybrids, these loving beings. When do you think, or when, if they told you, they knew unequivocally that they were hybrids as opposed to, just psychically inclined or
Yeah.
something else?
Just a different sort of person. Yeah.
Exactly. Because I think
Yeah.
there are a lot of those people here, and I want to get to that a little bit
I
later.
think
but
so, yeah.
When was there a threshold that they crossed that they just knew, I'm a hybrid?
Well, it was different for each one of these hybrids in our book, our study. One of them found out when she was age 35, and her father took her aside, and she knew that he'd been in the military for his career, and he took her aside and he said, "It's time for you to know that before you were born, before you were even conceived, I was part of a secret program having to do with some part of the government, I don't know which part, and that they were trying to see what would happen if they could mix extraterrestrial genetics with human genetics." So in other words, they already, so this is several decades ago, they already were doing experiments with extraterrestrials who had come to Earth, maybe in crashed discs, or landed peacefully and decided to stay for a while and work with humans who would be interested in learning about them. So this is one of those programs. So what they did, they took the eggs from the mother and the sperm from the father of Cynthia, this hybrid I'm talking about right now. Eggs from the mother, sperm from the father, and then in abductions. And then, but in this case it was abductions by humans, not abductions by extraterrestrials. And then they took that reproductive material from the human mother, human father, and mixed it with extraterrestrial reproductive material and genetics, creating an embryo, probably in a little petri dish type of arrangement, probably very carefully done.
Of course.
And then they visited the mother again. She was not conscious of this, and implanted the little embryo in her womb, and that embryo grew and developed for 9 months and was born, and that was this hybrid named Cynthia.
Cynthia Crawford, I
Cynthia
believe, right?
Crawford.
I recall, yes.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful woman. I've known her for several years now. So that's the way it happened for her. Another lady named Juju or Jujulee, which is the name given by her star family, her extraterrestrials. She was born the regular way through human mother and father and grew to the age of 6. And then the beings whom she was partly made up of, the extraterrestrial beings, came and visited her and told her that she had, they visited her and they injected her, regular injection like we do, with their extraterrestrial genetics and with some other extraterrestrial types of genetics too. So she, at age 6, became a hybrid.
Became a hybrid.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. That's quite a different scenario.
And then I know of cases where the human mother of the hybrid was pregnant with the hybrid. In other words, just as far as they knew, just a regular old mother and father, conceiving and getting pregnant. And then the mother was taken by a group of extraterrestrials, and in their facility on board the spaceship, the mother was already pregnant with a little embryo, or even having developed into the fetus stage. The mother was injected with extraterrestrial genetics through the wall of her abdomen and the wall of the uterus, and into the fetus inside. So, and then that fetus was born, regular way that we all do it, but already, you see, from before birth, had the extraterrestrial genetics. So, and that seemed to be quite a common way. I've known of several people who were hybridized.
Hybridized, that would be the literal definition.
In that particular way. So each of these people didn't find out until various ages that they were. Now, all of them, as I had said, felt really different than the other people. They didn't necessarily look different, but although most of them tend to be very, very slim and always have been slim, but a couple of them a little bit more like regular size. So they, in other words, lived some years of their lives feeling very different, but not knowing why. Yeah, and found out in various ways, through the beings usually, telling them. But they all had lifelong encounters with their extraterrestrials, the type that they're made up, and they all had these encounters and what many people call abductions, without objecting to them, without being afraid of them. And when you really think about it, it's understandable they weren't afraid of these beings because they had that kind of being in their own makeup.
Right.
So these beings have been guides for these people, through the years of their lives, and have really helped them out a lot and helped them to amp up their healing ability and their clairvoyant ability and so forth. So these people are always happy when their own type of beings, extraterrestrials, appear and visit with them or take them away for a couple of hours or so. One lady, Jacqueline, was taken away for a couple of weeks.
Physically taken away?
Physically taken away for a couple of weeks by some of her beings, which included the mantis beings and a couple of other species. Several of them talk about beings which they call tall, white zeta beings, not to be confused with the little zeta reticuli guys who get so much attention in the press, and people usually don't like them. So I'd like to add right away that there are many, many different types of extraterrestrial beings who do come here. And some are not so favorably received. In fact, people don't want contact with them, and it happens anyway. But some are more sort of neutral. Oh, it's okay to have encounters with them. And then some that the people really totally welcome visits
Like the
from.
mantis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. You obviously have some very rich testimony from these 8 for your book, of course, hybrids. What, Barbara, do you think for you or Miguel was the most revelational thing? Can you think of one thing, if you could isolate it? I'm sure all of it was just extraordinary, but
every bit was
yeah, I'm sure,
fascinating.
but something that you just wouldn't expect.
Yes, what I did not expect, nor did he, at the beginning, was how spiritually oriented they are, and how spiritually oriented these extraterrestrial beings are.
How so?
So
when you
they
say
consider that
yeah.
they each have a mission here, and that is to be upgrading as they can with people they can meet with and who can come to know them, to upgrade humanity into a higher understanding of our real spiritual nature. And so they do this in various ways, each one of them. They all do some teaching of classes that people actually attend. Sometimes the people know that they're a hybrid. Sometimes they just think of them as a great spiritual teacher.
So they don't necessarily announce that as their teaching, or that's not necessarily...
No, I think they don't hide it, but if it somehow seems to come out, that's fine. And these people, by the way, at this big conference the past few days, they were forthright in saying what their actual names are and the state that they live in, or the country, because we have 3 in England. And so they don't go around announcing it or advertising it. They're not here for fame or fanfare, but if people seem to be receptive and want to know, where did you learn all your healing skills, for instance, or how did you develop all your psychic ability, that they will say, well, actually, I'm a mixture of human and extraterrestrial genetics.
Received,
and they will say which groups, which extraterrestrial groups. Like some of them have quite a bit of Arcturian. There are Arcturians from the planet Arcturus, and some of them are blue Arcturians. Apparently there are different races of Arcturians. And there are beings from Sirius, that planet, and some of them are Syrian warriors of light. I'm talking about the beings whose genetics are mixed with these hybrids, and the tall white zetas, the mantis beings, and reptilian.
Yeah.
So some of these people, some of these women who are just the most beautiful, wonderful, loving women, even beautiful from human standards. I mean, you'd look at one of them and think, wow, isn't she pretty? And just looks so lovely, like a lovely person as well. And that they really are more spiritually developed, and they get guidance from their type of extraterrestrial in helping to raise the spiritual understanding of human beings. So the spiritual aspect was, to the extent that it is, was a surprise to me and to Miguel Mendonca.
Interesting.
And they talked about, helping humanity and helping individuals to evolve. And that got into the discussion about ascension. Now, ascension is something that many groups, more spiritually oriented groups, among humans are talking about anyway.
That's right.
And that means that they are helping us to devolve in consciousness and spirituality enough so that we can individually ascend to sort of a higher plane of existence. It doesn't mean that we have to die physically to do that, but that we can kind of live in a different consciousness. Mm-hmm. And if there are enough people who are sort of developing spiritually, getting ready to live in a sort of like a higher level, should we say, mm-hmm. of consciousness, that we can, and this would be people from all over the world who are developing in this way, that we can live, it will seem like the earth, but it would actually be a couple of dimensions higher, like the fifth dimension they kept mentioning.
Like Dolores Cannon's New Earth, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so it's possible that eventually, I don't see it coming soon myself, but that all of humanity could evolve, and the earth itself could evolve, or as they say, ascend, into a higher frequency. And when that would happen, I hope it will happen, that we would not see things like war and killing and murders and gang fights and competition and greed and all of that, because it's just, as we're saying, a higher consciousness, a higher understanding, mm-hmm. and that there's no need for people to even think about conducting themselves that way, no cruelty of any kind, So they each have a mission to help where they can, wherever it is that they're living, and they all live in a different location, to just, help as they can to bring about this evolvement with certain groups of people and individuals.
Right. I have to ask you, they're obviously on a mission and dedicated to that mission. Have you heard from them how they think it's going in terms of beyond expectation, below expectation? What are their thoughts?
Well, I think they tend to feel, as it turns out, very much like I do, unfortunately, that the earth, so much of what goes on the earth, not all of it, but so much of it in particular pockets, mm-hmm. Is so negative and so dysfunctional, tragically so. And we hear about all these things on the news, we know this. And also, there are many, many groups of people and many individuals who are really accelerating, evolving in consciousness, and who really are here for service to their fellow man and service to animals. Mm-hmm. So they recognize, and I'm very aware of this myself, of the light and the dark, the good, the bad, the polar opposites, mm-hmm. that this humanity has everything in it. And that's how it is in three dimensions,
in three-dimensional
world. And they're helping to bring about a gradual upgrading of that. They're also very aware that, as you mentioned before, with Mary Rodwell's work, especially the star children, the younger people who are being born and who have a higher consciousness and really are here for service. So some of these star children used to be called, and maybe still are, indigo children.
That's right, or crystal,
and crystal
rainbow.
Children,
That's right.
Rainbow.
Yeah.
And there still are babies being born here and there, allegedly all over the world, I'm very happy to say, who are this type, who come in and they will see the dysfunctions going on in the world, and they will be here to, in whatever way they can in their own local area, to make a difference, mm-hmm. to help to upgrade the whole thing.
Yeah.
Humanity is so wonderful in so many ways, and so atrociously horrible.
The paradox,
Yeah,
isn't it?
in some other ways
Yeah.
with people. And we could have such a beautiful, clean, well-functioning planet and beautifully functioning humanity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is possible.
Of course it
So
is.
they are here to help in whatever way they
Yeah,
can
wow.
to bring that about.
Wonderfully said. Well, there's such a sense of frustration on the part of those who feel their mission to be service to others.
Yes.
And I think all of us, particularly in this work, just have to take a deep breath and keep going and keep praying and
Right.
hoping and working.
Yeah.
I triggered something in my own mind. You probably saw the expression on my face change when I said the word paradox. It triggered a question that I had for you pertaining to the book, and that's the phenomenon that we have so neatly labeled ET UFO. It obviously has many facets to it. But taken together, there are what we call these paradoxes and contradictions that exist in terms of understanding what the ET, and I always put that in quotes because you and I both know I think it's a lot bigger than ET as it's been popularized.
Yeah.
And I think you address those paradoxes and contradictions in your book in terms of understanding what this is. And again, the scope is larger than I can even hold my hands out. Do you think that these hybrids and even the beings themselves can help, or maybe I'll rephrase the question, what these hybrids are doing in their teaching is helping to erase the paradoxes and contradictions of what it means to be ET or what the phenomenon is about?
Yes, I do. I think they're very much about that. They emphasize, for instance, that we humans are all one. We're all from the same source. We're the same substance in a way, in terms of our beingness, being beings. And not only that, but we are all life on Earth is one, connected with the same as, with minor differences, with all life in the universe. So they talk about how the universe, whether we are told that or not, is actually populated by many, many, many different species of beings. And, only now our scientists or governments or whatever are beginning to admit that maybe there might be some life out there.
Maybe. You
But
think?
if so, probably very low level, basic, rudimentary. But these beings know that the whole cosmos is populated with intelligent beings of many, many, many different types. And of those many types, some of them come to Earth, have real interest in human beings. And some of them, of course, don't. Their focus is on something else. But the ones who are here and are working through people like these hybrids, they want us humans to know that we're part of that whole reality, and we all, every single type out there, and all of us,
Including the hybrids are part of that.
including the hybrids,
Yeah.
including the insects and the animals, the trilobites, everything, the big mammals, everything on Earth, all life forms on Earth, and all life forms on those planets out there in the cosmos. We're all part of the same source. Those beings don't necessarily use the term God, but when our hybrids have asked them, what is your understanding of creation and your understanding of God, they say, well, we don't use that word God. We don't define it quite as definitely, as specifically as God, but we all know, it's just part of our understanding that we are all part of this great creative loving source. And that so therefore there's no real difference. There are superficial differences between the tall Arcturians and the Syrians and the reptilians and the humans, but we're all part of that same creation. And they, each one of them, without knowing what the other hybrids were saying in their interviews, each one said some of the same things, such as what I've just been talking about, and each one said a number of different times, we are all one.
Really emphasizing that.
And one of them even surprised Miguel and myself in one of these interviews, saying, because we were talking about, different factions on the earth, and that there are some, what we perceive as negative extraterrestrials and some positive ones, and this person, I think it was Juju, said, but there are no sides. There's no sides in the universe, that we think in terms of light and dark, black and white, good and bad, and so, but it's all different aspects of the one. Yeah. And we both remembered, we talked about it after the interview was over, at length about this. Isn't that a remarkable thought? It shouldn't be remarkable, but struck us that way, that there are no sides. It just appears that way. It appears that there's an enemy.
But they don't look at it. That's a very good... Let's stay on that for a minute.
But really, we're all part of the oneness.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I think this is a sticking point, frankly. I think I just sort of got this sort of word picture in my mind. I think maybe one of the greatest messages they could convey is that we, Barbara, are a society that has been indoctrinated into opposites. The absolute need to commit to one or the other. I think of something that our friend Daryl, a.k.a. Bashar, has said. It's not this or that, it's this and that.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of the word picture that I'm getting. I think this is a sticking point that I hope our audience will sort of take note of. That, because I really feel that a lot of the strife that we have experienced historically has come from this incessant need to take sides, really making more real than it should be good versus bad, sick versus healthy, up versus down. And it's also a mechanism, I think, to divide people.
And look at, you're so right, I completely agree. And look at what's promoted in our culture, in the Western world and probably elsewhere. We've got Republicans and Democrats, and there is this mighty, mighty contest of oppositional forces going on. We have football games. I mean, I'm thinking of some of the big things that millions of people are aware of.
That's right.
The Dodgers versus the whoever's, the Boston Red Sox or whatever.
You had to say that, didn't you?
Trying to think.
But you're right. You're absolutely
right. And the big football teams, the Super Bowl, the winning of the pennant, winning of the World Series. It's all oppositional. That you're for this team or you're for that team. And you want your team to win. So there's so much emphasis on separateness and over and againstness. So these hybrids are here to say just the opposite. We've gotten addicted into our way of thinking. Of the opposites and the good, the bad, the polar opposites. So a very interesting thing this past week at the International UFO Congress, and I just feel so good about this. There's a researcher named David Jacobs, and he does a lot of regressing of people to their extraterrestrial encounters, as I do. We've both been doing it for, at least 25 years on opposite sides of the country, interestingly enough. He's in Pennsylvania, and I'm in Southern California. And so for years and years, he has derived from the regressions he's conducted that all extraterrestrial beings are totally negative.
He has.
He
Really?
concludes this from the work that he's done. There's nothing good there at all. All of these species out there who visit human beings are totally negative and abusive to us. That's what he thinks. And then he got more and more into the whole question of hybrids, while I, unbeknownst to him, was getting very involved with the whole question of hybrids out here on the West Coast. And his conclusions about the hybrid phenomenon is that the hybrids are made on board the craft and then brought to Earth. They have enough human in them that they can survive here, and that they don't know how to live life in the Earth, so that the abductees who happen to know them from the ships are mind controlled to teach these hybrids, his type, not mine, how to live, how to buy food at a supermarket, how to balance a checkbook, how to use a telephone, and how to do everything that we do on Earth, and that it's all a big threat, and that these hybrids that he's talking about are here to eventually take over the world from humanity. So he gave a lecture on one day of this UFO Congress, and the next day I gave a lecture and had these hybrids come up. These are polar opposite points
Here we go
of view.
again, right? With the
Yeah,
polar opposites.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I made quite a point of that in my lecture, that he represents the dark part of it, I represent the light part of it, and that's how it is in our third dimension, And then the next day there was a panel about abductions, and who did I sit next to on the panel? David Jacobs. And
Of
so
course.
he gave his thing about the totally negative threat about these hybrids who are here to take over the world. And he said all abductions, the purpose of all abductions is to create hybrids who will take over the world. And here I was with a very different point of view. But the beautiful thing about it was that I just felt so pleased, and I think it was inspired by some of these beings, no doubt. Mm-hmm. And that was that I could say, look, we're all part of this oneness, this polarity of it, my polarity of it, and let's not draw sides, let's not draw teams about this, let's not be over and against each other about this. It's all part of the whole fabric.
Absolutely.
And it just felt so good to say that. And so many people came up afterwards and said, thank you for saying what you said.
How did he feel? Did you notice any slight shift? I mean, if we're talking 25 years of research and that is his overall hypothesis, I don't know. But did you notice any shift at all with him after that?
Well, it's not that he said anything that indicated a shift, but I had a few conversations with him privately afterwards, and you could see that he was really affected. And actually, he said he felt embarrassed. I don't think he would have said that to the audience, but he felt embarrassed about that whole thing. I think the differences.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I would say something quite extraordinary occurred, maybe, if we just put it on the record.
So who knows what will happen from here on. But
interesting. Wow.
it was kind of a nice bringing together. And I feel like we're friends.
I've heard of David, and I know that he has quite a following in a slightly different aspect. But, we're winding down, and, of course, as is usually the case, I think we could have done 2 hours, 2.5 hours, or 3, and we still wouldn't complete the conversation because it could go on for a long time. But I have to leave it with a couple of questions I had for you. As I hear these stories of, in some cases we call them hybrids, in Barbara's cases she's referring to the new human, in any case, we're talking about extraordinary individuals that are coming clearly in greater number. Mm-hmm. Have you ever sought to even contemplate what percentage of our human population may in fact be some semblance of these hybrids?
Hybrids?
Yeah.
Well, it would have to be a total guess. I'd say it's probably a small percentage of the human population, so I don't even know what number to put on that.
Well, we're talking about apparently over 7 billion people, so it's that's probably not a fair question. But I mean, I don't know, perhaps it's an instinct that you might have that would say, there may be a lot more of them here than one might imagine. And here's sort of a part two to that, and that is, do you think, Barbara, that there may be individuals walking around today living their normal day-to-day lives that may be hybrid and not realize it?
Absolutely. In fact, at this conference, I met two women just in the course of people mingling around. And one of them, I looked at her and I immediately thought, she's a reptilian hybrid. And anyway, then I got to know her a little bit. I didn't say that right away, of course.
That would be, by the way.
But it turned out that she was having some very unusual experiences, and she felt a lot of changing of the skin around her eyes, and kept talking about that. And I said, and then I was asking her questions, saying, what does that skin feel like when it changes? It would change from time to time, and last a couple hours maybe, and then change back to her normal skin. Anyway, it turned out that she had skin that clearly suggested it was reptilian skin. And I could see it coming because I had already immediately thought of her as a reptilian hybrid. So we talked for probably an hour or so over dinner, and then she said, "I've sometimes wondered if I'm partly reptilian."
She did say
that. She said it. I like to have it come from the person if possible.
Yes, that's very
And then
smart.
I said, "Well, that's what I thought right away," and then she's slept on that idea, and then came back to me the next day and told about experiences that she has with reptilian beings, and it all adds up that she probably is a reptilian hybrid. By the way, a couple of our hybrids in this book, Meet the Hybrids, have the occasions when they actually, what we call, shapeshift into their reptilian form. And that is very interesting, and they've been observed, like Cynthia observed this other hybrid named Jujuli, sleep. They shared a room at a conference, a hotel room, and Cynthia came in and Juju was already sleeping in bed in her full reptilian form without realizing it. And it was okay with Cynthia because she has a good bit of reptilian in her. So she felt
This was
happy
just recently
seeing
at the
this.
conference that they were attending.
Yeah, it was actually another conference where she saw this a couple of years ago. And Charmaine, this lady from England, had an occasion where she was with some of these extraterrestrial beings, and this was a few years ago, and she had felt like she must be something else other than just human. And here she had the visit with some reptilian beings and a couple of other types. And she said, "Is there any way I can have confirmation that I feel so different, that I feel like maybe there's some other components in me?" And they helped her to shapeshift into her full reptilian form.
Isn't that something?
And she was so happy with both of these people.
So none of it was shocking, or because they had some
No,
idea
it just felt like, oh, good, I'm finally really myself. And then they gradually shape-shifted back into their human form, but feeling so much more complete.
Mm.
It's kind of like, I'm going to quickly make up an example. It might be like a person living here in the United States who has a lot of Asian component in them, but maybe their family never told them that because they also have Western human component mostly. But the person's always been drawn to the Asian cultures and always felt happy when seeing Asian people and wondered why. And then eventually it comes out, maybe they're fully adult, that yes, that she does have Asian ancestry in the mix. And then she feels so happy to know that.
Relieved almost.
Like
that,
part of her had been denied.
Right.
Or it could be true between the black and white races. The either way, that a black person might feel, why do I kind of identify often with the whites? And yet I don't think there's any white mixture in my genetics here, but then eventually finds out from some relative that there is. Oh, that's why I feel that way. Oh, good, now I can accept that. I can embrace it. Or the other way around, white person discovering they've got Native American or black or who knows what,
how
Asian
intuition works.
And that once you know who you really are, it feels more complete.
Yeah.
And that's how these hybrids are, that when they learned in various ways that they really do have those components in them, and it all comes together. Each one of them, unbeknownst to each other, in these interviews, all 8 of them, said that at the point when they actually realized or had some kind of validation that they had the extraterrestrial components, they felt tremendously relieved.
Right.
That, now I understand.
Yeah. Now I understand.
And in the meantime, they were having positive experiences with those kinds of beings. So it was a very well-received piece of news,
Well, I have to tell you, I hope, Barbara, as we're being listened to around the world, that there are a few people saying, now I understand.
Yes.
Because you do such a beautiful job in explaining this extraordinarily complex, extraordinarily important, and extraordinarily beautiful phenomenon that we call the hybrids.
Yay. Thank you.
Meet the Hybrids, the lives and missions of ET ambassadors on Earth by Barbara Lamb, Miguel Mendonca. And I know we can get this wonderful book, which I'm going home with today, with a signature from Barbara, at Amazon. But is this also available at your site, barbaralammft.com?
That's the website, but I do not have it posted on there yet.
Okay.
So I think the good way would be to order it on Amazon.com. And they're very good about sending them right out.
Yes, they are.
Yeah,
I witnessed that
you
myself.
wouldn't get a signature that way, but
that's right.
But
sorry,
you would
folks.
get the book.
I'm getting a signature today. And I'm so delighted, and so delighted to see you again after.
I am too.
3 years, I think so.
Yeah, that's
Barbara,
right.
Thank you so much, and once again, congratulations on your wonderful Lifetime Achievement Award.
Oh, thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you all who are listening, and go forth with hopefully an expanded and deepened appreciation for life.
Absolutely.
And the different forms that life can take.
Absolutely. I second that. And on that note, we're signing off. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Take care.
In all the years I've been familiar with the work of Barbara Lamb, one thing stands out loud and clear for me, and that's her consistency in explaining the benevolent aspects of the beings she's had occasion to get to know, either directly or indirectly. As far as the hybrids are concerned, this theme is beautifully underscored with their message of unconditional love and their mission to graduate humankind to a much higher state of consciousness. If you enjoyed this interview, be sure to stay tuned in, as I will next have a chat with Barbara's co-author, Miguel Mendonca, and one of the hybrid beings featured in their book. This is sure to be a must listen. Until then, I thank you for spending time with us here at Higher Journeys Radio, presented in association with Conscious Life News.